Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, ladies and gentlemen, what we see, ladies and gentlemen, is that what we have to do is that if there's something we have to fear, you don't run away from it, you tackle the issue head on, you fix it, you make sure that you start living a world where you don't have to live in fear anymore. You don't run away from the issues, you tackle them. And that's what we see on side proposition today. And what we've seen from side proposition is an idea that can lead to long-term stability. What we've seen from side opposition to, ladies and gentlemen, is this defense of the status quo that we've seen many times not to work time and time again. And really what we've seen from side opposition today is a broken record. We've seen them time and time again. Their only really argument is that Iran's unstable. In response to anything we brought up today on side proposition, they've said Iran's unstable. Now I'm going to be proving two things today in my speech. First of all, well, Iran's instability is completely exaggerated by side opposition. And second of all, if there's one thing we have proved to you on side proposition is how deterrence works best in unstable regions. And then another thing we saw from side opposition today is their ignorance of all the examples. And what we've shown you, ladies and gentlemen, is that when tensions are at the highest, when tensions are so high that countries would normally go to war with each other, these crises have been averted because of nuclear weapons, because countries are sensible, because countries act in their best interests. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk. What we see from side opposition is that the case really hasn't changed from the skeptics of deterrence since the 1900s, and nuclear deterrence has proved all these skeptics wrong. We've seen that their case is very outdated, and ladies and gentlemen, let's change the mistakes we made before, let's improve foreign policy, let's stabilize the region, and let's create peace. And those are the three themes I'll be talking about today. First of all, foreign policy, second of all, stabilization, and third of all, create peace. And there's another thing we have to tackle about today is that their case line is that all nuclear weapons are to be feared and to be cautioned. Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, I've talked to you about how we shouldn't fear it. We've seen that deterrence has worked for 100 years and that it will continue to work. We still see no reason why deterrence should fail. That's something side opposition hasn't clashed against. And then they also said it should be cautioned. And that's something that we on side proposition also agree with. Nuclear weapons should be cautioned, but that's why we need to push this mandate forward so that we can help Iranians with their security over their own nuclear agenda and not keep it in the dark from Western policies. So first what I'd like to do is go over the arguments made by side proposition and show you why they work. First of all, self-interest. And what we've seen is that they really haven't understood Iran. And what they've seen is that they've typically fear-mongered on the idea of Iran. What we've seen is that Iran, we've shown you that they haven't attacked aggressively in the case of the bombing that hit in Amman in Iraq. And the last time Iran has attacked any of its neighbors was in the 1800s, ladies and gentlemen, when they took back land that was previously taken by the UK. So the last time Iran has actually attacked any of their neighbors was in the 1800s. This is a regime that cares about the survival of the regime, a regime that looks for self-preservation. And then they talked about how energy should be feared. And that's something that we completely disagree with side proposition. Nuclear energy is a path forward, and what we've seen from many universities is the assurance that nuclear energy is only going to get safer, and when we can harvest nuclear energy at 100% efficiency, at 100% security, that's when we can solve more than one problem. So this problem takes two birds with one stone. And another thing we would say is that countries generally like to protect themselves. That's something that side opposition doesn't really understand. Countries don't want to be hemmed by another country. Countries want to protect themselves. It's just plain logic. No one wants to make sure that their security lies in the hands of someone else. That's something that we would say it does not lead to long-term security. It is not in the best interest of Iran. And then they talked about Iran's instability. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what I would like to bring up is a couple of examples of unstable regimes that have shown that the deterrence works. First of all, Pakistan and India. Pakistan has been shown to harbor many terrorists. Their government has been shown to be corrupt time and time again. But before Pakistan and India had nuclear weapons, India and Pakistan went into war 4 times. After nuclear weapons, they haven't gone into war a single time. So Pakistan, we've seen that it works. We've seen that the US has helped Pakistan make sure that Pakistan's nuclear weapons don't get in the hands of the terrorists. Another example, the Cold War. This was a Russia that we saw where Stalin just killed millions of its own troops on the Eastern Front. Something unprecedented. Many of the things side opposition told us about Iran is many of the things Westerners told about Russia during the Cold War. We told that Russia was cruel. We said that they were tyrannical, and we said that Russia was bent on global domination. Did the Cold War work out perfectly? Yes. There's a stark contrast between the Cold War and World War II. And finally, another example. Let's take a look at Mao's China. This was a leader who was totally crazy. We saw that Mao went out and specifically said that a nuclear Armageddon would be good for the region, would be good for the world. That's what Mao said. He believed that if 50% of the world got blown up in a nuclear weapon, in a nuclear war, that would be a good thing. But Mao did not engage in any nuclear conflicts of any kind, and we see that that's not even on that list of China's at all. And so what we see is that deterrence works, and we've shown you time and time again, it especially works in unstable regions. Something side opposition really hasn't argued with us today. And then the final thing I would like to talk about is about side opposition actually brought up. Now, their first argument, ladies and gentlemen, was this idea about hostility. And we've shown you that their only argument about Iran's hostility is the same thing you could say for many Middle East regions, many Middle East countries that have nuclear weapons. We feel that Iran has the right to these very same nuclear weapons to protect the self-interest of that region. And then they talked about transparency. And ladies and gentlemen, well, first of all, why is Iran acting so ambiguous? Because the status quo right now, what the Western liberal democracies are doing is that if they know that Iran is developing nuclear weapons, they start playing sanctions. They start putting trade tariffs. And so the reason why Iran is so ambiguous over their nuclear agenda is because they don't want Western nations to know about it, because they know that Western nations would react in the form of putting more sanctions that are crippling Iran's economy. How can we fix this, ladies and gentlemen? By helping Iran develop these nuclear weapons so that the policy of deterrence can't work. We've seen that the leaders of Israel have come out and said that they would bomb Iran, and we believe it is the right for the Iranian leaders to look after their own country and give them the right to nuclear weapons. So now I'd like to get into the three major themes. First of all, foreign policy. And here I'd like to talk about the idea of Brazil and Argentina. Now, in 1980s, when Brazil and Argentina had this little nuclear arms race. And what happened was that when Brazil and Argentina both required nuclear weapons, they went into a path of developing peace accords with each other, and we've seen that has worked till present day. So the way to help out foreign policy, ladies and gentlemen, is to ensure that all countries involved are on the same footing, that no country has an inherent advantage over another country. That's something we on side proposition strongly believe against. And we've seen that it stabilizes the region. And we've seen that it centralizes the country more, and what more is that we've seen no reason for Iran to be volatile. And third of all, it creates peace. And this is time and time again, we've seen that deterrence has proved its worth over the last 100 years, and we see no reason why it will fail. It has worked in regimes that we have called very tyrannical. It has worked in regimes that we have called volatile. But the fact is, ladies and gentlemen, self-preservation is at the heart of every human being, is at the heart of every nation, and it is for these reasons, ladies and gentlemen, that side proposition has clearly won this debate. And what's more, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that side opposition status quo would only lead to a worser alternative. This idea of a preemptive war. Many diplomats, including Hillary Clinton, have seen the motion forward of a preemptive war into Iran to stop Iran from meddling with their nuclear weapons. What we see on side op proposition is equal footing for all leads to peace in the future. Thank you.